Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 108 of the Yakking Show. This is the show for awakening you to new perspectives for the changing world we find ourselves in. Quick request, if you like our show, please subscribe to the channel you're watching or listening on. It helps our guests get more exposure, and that's good for them. As always, we have interesting guests. Today is no exception, and today's guest will really awaken you to some new perspectives you might not even have thought of, but you need to get used to for the brave new world we're heading into. Not my job to introduce the guests. So first, let's welcome our co-host, Kathleen Beauvais from Waterloo, Canada. How are you, Kathleen?
I'm doing great, Peter. The sun is shining and I'm loving it. So thanks for that intro. And thank you all so very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate you and we love reading your comments. So please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have a very special guest. I'm really excited about this interview. Welcome to the show, Nicholas Prouten. Nicholas, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. So, Nicholas, for the sake of our audience, can you tell our audience a little bit about your background? And you are the founder of a company called Lode, L-O-D-E. So perhaps you can tell our audience about that.
Absolutely. Minor correction there. I'm not the founder. There's actually a group of individuals of which I was actually not a part of. I came into the project a year after, and I operate as the COO of Lode Payments International. And really, Lode is at its core an initiative to restore silver and gold to the monetary system as currency, as actual money. Which is a pretty ambitious and bold narrative. For older listeners of the audience can perhaps remember a time when we actually had the United States dollar backed on a gold standard. And during these periods of time where we've actually used gold and silver as a foundation for currency, inflation was largely much more nominal compared to what it is now. We've walked away from that, and what we've seen is that it's been a huge contributing factor to the erosion of the middle class. And so there was this sort of felt desire within our community and our core group of founders to take modern technology, take a standard that is tried, true, trusted, and used all throughout the world, throughout all of human history, essentially, and marry the two together, essentially. And that's really what the past 4 years have been about. And it's been a really exciting journey, riding the highs and the lows of the blockchain industry and the cryptocurrency space. And I'm excited to be talking with you guys about it today.
Wow, as Kathleen said, we're looking forward to it. Now, many in our audience, and myself included, know a little bit about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, but that's about it. I think for the average man in the street, it's a gray area. So just enlighten our audience a little bit what we're talking about on those two, blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. And it's always a great question to ask. And I really never get tired of explaining it because at first glance, it's not simple. But essentially, what's important to distinguish is there's a separation between a blockchain and a cryptocurrency.
Sure.
A cryptocurrency is a financial tool or vehicle or asset class. Choose a buzzword that uses blockchain technology. Blockchain technology essentially is a digital ledger that, rather than relying on intermediaries, so two banks or the Visa rails, for example, to transfer value, they use what's called a consensus algorithm to act as a virtual handshake that this value is being transferred. And this consensus is conducted by, in the case of Bitcoin, tens of thousands of computers, hence this concept of decentralization that comes up, and I can dive into that a little bit more. So it's a virtual handshake that basically replaces the need for intermediaries like banks to play middleman and take cuts and so on and so forth, and it directly transfers that value from a player A to player B. And once the transaction has successfully been processed, it's stored in blocks of information, and these blocks are like a Lego structure that you can't take apart. You can only stack on top and move forward from it. And because of this, it is immutable. And this type of technology brings a whole new level of transparency and accountability to the world of finance that has arguably been absent before. And it also brings a new level of security, again, because of that consensus algorithm, because tens of thousands of computers are reaching this consensus. And in order for it to be manipulated, you would require at the very least a 51% hack, which again, in the situation of something like Bitcoin, is a very, very difficult thing to achieve, because you have everybody from, people like me mining Bitcoin on their phones, processing transactions on their phones, to supercomputers in China processing these transactions, right? So that's kind of a very, very baseline understanding of what blockchain technology is. And cryptocurrencies are currencies, securities, financial assets that exist on this technology.
Okay. So help me out a little bit. You used the Lego analogy, which I think is a really good one. So simplified form, if I had a Lego with 6 pin of those little pins on the top, you had one with 4, and Kathleen had one with 2, and we were the only people to hold red Lego blocks with those configurations. And the only way we could do the handshake was to fit all 3 together and agree on all 3. Is this a sort of non-digital version of what we're talking about? Or am I making it even more complicated than it is? Tell me if I am.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. The blocks have certain set sizes, right? So you can't go down to 2 squares or 4 squares.
All right.
Right. And so it's not just your transaction that is being processed, which is why some blockchains, some blockchains are slower and some blockchains are faster than each other, because the amount of transactions that they can process at a given time are stored in single blocks and then moved on, and then the next batch, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I'm with you. That helps.
Clear as mud?
Yeah. No, a little bit better than that. I know Kathleen's got one she wants to ask you. Let's go.
So your company offers a payment system that's backed by gold and silver. Can you explain that further? How does it work exactly?
Absolutely. So over the past 4 years, we've done a couple things. One, we've created digital gold and silver assets on a blockchain that can process 156,000 transactions per second. I actually think it's 160,000 transactions per second, making it sort of as instantaneous as your traditional Visa and Master rails. This digital currency that we've produced, we have 2 of them. We have a digital gold and we have a digital silver asset. And this, every single one of those coins is backed by either 1 gram of vaulted, audited, and insured silver, and conversely, 1 milligram of vaulted, audited, and insured gold. So that's one side of what we've done. We've created these currencies. And the important thing to understand here is you see a $1.2 trillion market cap for the cryptocurrency sector right now, but that's all speculative demand versus practical application. One of the areas where the industry is still really, I wouldn't say struggling, but developing, is in the payment solution side of things. How do you take this currency and you make it practical for the world to use?
Right.
So what we've done is we've spent 4 years building our mobile wallet technology to make it easy for people to acquire this digital gold and silver, as well as spend and use this digital gold and silver practically in their day-to-day lives. And this is coming in the variety of forms. For example, getting merchants to actually accept our currency just outright, obviously is the preferred option, and where we think we'll go and have the most success in potentially developing nations around the world, emerging economies in Africa, places like Venezuela, et cetera, et cetera. However, in the Western world, individuals are probably pretty comfortable with their USD and their Canadian dollars. So being able to pay at the point of sale and with your digital currency and have it settle to fiat, and making it feel intuitive and natural and as ubiquitous as traditional payments infrastructures are. So that's what our mobile wallet technology is doing. And in this year, we're launching our merchant services program, which will allow people to, accept in fiat and settle to our digital gold and silver, and a whole host of the traditional sort of payment processing experiences, with the added benefit of being able to instantly settle your business in digital gold and silver. And in addition to that, transacting on our blockchains and on our cryptocurrencies versus using something like MasterCard, where merchants and individuals and businesses are losing, up to, between 3, maybe 2.5 if you're lucky. But in a high risk business, like something like CBD and even blockchain companies, they can go as high as 9% with a 6-month hold on your funds, versus what we can do, which is give people instant settlement, right? Instant settlement at a fraction of the cost, a very small denomination of a percent. And what's nice is that your assets are now stored in something that is inflation resistant, that you can instantly liquidate as you need to into a government-backed currency.
Interesting. So can I jump in, Kathleen, on that one? Nicholas, the gold and silver currency you're talking about, digital currency you're talking about, the value of those, your 1 milligram of gold or your gram of silver, whatever, that is always tied to the actual market of the physical gold and silver, is it? The values, should I say?
Absolutely. So when I say it's backed, I mean there is real, tangible, physical, audited, vaulted, insured metal behind it. So it does follow the price of silver and gold. What silver and gold have done very, very well over a long period of time is maintain their purchasing power when compared to fiat currencies. Comparatively, the US dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power over the past 100 years, right? So our methodology is it's better to run your business and conduct your business in assets that will not depreciate year over year, and simply use those government-backed currencies as vehicles to do things such as pay taxes and contract employees and so on and so forth. But the core of it should operate in these assets. And this even serves a greater purpose if your business is international, where you can often get, huge fees or hemorrhage cash in terms of FX transitioning, and through cryptocurrencies and through blockchain technology, we're able to skirt a lot of that. So as you can see, it's a pretty ambitious and massive project. And 4 years later, we have about 7,500 plus people in our community in our open beta, and we're active in 135 countries already. And really 2021 is about taking the culminative effort of the past 4 years and bringing it out to the world in a big way.
Right. So I'm really sympathetic to what you're doing, because you hear from my accent, I'm not a long-term Canadian. I lived in Africa for most of my life, and I experienced the hyperinflation of Zimbabwe, where we carried shoeboxes full of dollar notes, $50 notes, which were worth peanuts in hard currency terms. But I lived through that, so I'm petrified of inflation taking off, even to a fraction of that percent in the Western world. So, and all the problems you're talking about in developing countries, and all the back doors that have to be opened. This, to me, would be a wonderful idea. Yeah, I can see huge advantages. Wow. So yeah,
and
sure.
if I
Carry on.
may as well, because some people might be asking, okay, that's great, but we've got Bitcoin. Why not just use Bitcoin? And I'm not here to salt on anyone's wealth appreciation. I think that's fantastic. We're living through one of the biggest wealth generation events of our lifetime with Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is a terrible payment vehicle. It's slow, it's heavy, it takes between 10 minutes and half an hour to process a transaction. Am I going to go to a Starbucks and have a huge line of people behind me, while we wait for this transaction to process? Absolutely not. It's not reasonable. And in addition to that, Bitcoin comparatively, because yes, okay, you'll have some Bitcoin maximalists out there say, oh, it has an inherent value because of the technology. The technology is the value. Ultimately, Bitcoin is only valuable because people put their faith in it.
Yeah.
Right. Because they believe it is worth that much, making it extremely prone to volatility versus something that is backed by a tangible asset like gold, like silver. Silver is one of the biggest commodities in the world, over 10,000 use cases. So there is a floor in painting a nightmare scenario. There is a floor to how low silver can possibly go. So again, just pleading my case a little bit more.
No,
it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir.
I've heard that people who are owners of Bitcoin have trouble converting it. So.
Yeah, and there's been a concerted effort from central banks and from the financial sector up until recently, I would argue in the past couple of years, to discredit this technology. I'm talking about the Jamie Dimons of the world going on
Yep.
public television saying this is fraud, this is a scam, this is terrible. And in the same breath, his company is swooping up massive sums of Bitcoin, right? So there's this duplicity that has taken place in the industry. And it's because these traditional institutions, the concept of blockchain, the concept of this technology no longer needing them as intermediaries is an
Yep.
extremely intimidating thing. You're talking about what is essentially a global oligopoly, a very small circle of companies that have created a system that we all have to operate within. And then, you know, Bitcoin comes along and says, no, I don't want to play your game anymore. I don't want to play Monopoly anymore. I'm tired of it. And that's really upsetting, right? Because there's no finger, and because of Bitcoin's anonymity, there's no finger to point, there's nobody to sue. And yet people are really buying into this, and they can't stop or gate this technology because it doesn't depend on one central point of failure. And so until the industry could understand how do we insert this into our business practices and how do we adapt, there was a considerable effort to, you know, disavow Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And yes, there is a legitimate claim that there was a great deal of fraudulence in the early 2017 ICO boom. You know, projects just coming out of the woodworks that had no real use cases. But and that's fair, right? That's why we have regulation in place today, is to protect consumers and individuals from these things. But it's still a 180-degree turn from 2017 to where we are now, where you have Visa settling to USDT or USDC, you know, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, Tesla, you know, all accepting these cryptocurrencies. All the major banks have blockchain departments, and they're all implementing this into this business. And really what it was is they needed to figure out how could they control this market? How could they get into this market and establish it within their business practices so they didn't become irrelevant?
Wow. Can they control it though?
It's a good question. It's a good question. Can they control it? Can they control the blockchain itself? No, they can't do that. But they can control where people can buy. They can control access points to this technology. And yeah, okay, if you're a very sophisticated technologist, you can use VPNs and you know, use decentralized exchanges and so on. But I'll tell you right now, the user experience of that is terrible. It's like running into a brick wall. It's a straight up learning curve, versus being able to go on your local Coinbase or what is it? I think Coin Square, I think it's called in Canada, is a popular one. And being able to just use your debit and credit card and purchase, and away you go, right? So there are vehicles that they are going to use to gatekeep access to this technology, and who can have exposure to it. But with that being said, as soon as somebody actually has their hands on it and they have those funds in a private wallet, in which they control the private keys, it's out of their hands. Right. So
Okay.
that's why, you know, these regulated exchanges and all this regulation has come into place around where people can purchase and buy this stuff. That's how they control the market. And of course, now you have, you know, in terms of the stock market, you have futures and derivatives and stuff like that allow, you know, more sophisticated investors to enjoy all the same privileges that they do with traditional investing apps as well. So I tend to look at things not as competitors. You know, I never really fully believe that the banking industry is just going to collapse. It's all going to go away. And I'm not one of those people. And I think that the success comes through collaboration, and getting that mass adoption and getting people onto a better monetary system comes with collaboration with these regulators. And that's largely what we've done over the past years. Going into so many different regions of the world is not a simple task. And that's required us to work hand in hand with regulators across the world to make sure that we're bringing our products to people in a safe and compliant fashion.
Nicholas, you know, the central banks of the world, I can't imagine them wanting an alternative currency. They're very powerful and evil.
Yeah. No, and I mean, you're seeing that now. You're seeing that now as governments attempt to put their currencies onto blockchains, you know, central bank backed blockchains. To me, that's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It doesn't solve how that money actually works. It adds a couple new features, a couple new bells and whistles. So if a government says, oh, you know, we did not sell arms to that country, anybody can go on that blockchain, look it up and say, well, actually, yes, you did. This is your wallet address, and we can see. So it does bring certain levels of accountability to the forefront. However, the fact that the money is inflationary because it's only largely backed by a nation's debt, it still remains a truth. So it doesn't really solve the problem. It just means that you'll be able to settle your payments and convert into other currencies with greater ease. I think these central banks will still play a role. You know, they, especially as it pertains to individuals having to do things like pay bills and taxes and so on and so forth. There is a role for central bank currencies and for these institutions to exist. However, I think that role will be diminished as more and more people get easy access to a diverse way of holding their wealth that doesn't depend on these institutions to play middlemen or to quote unquote safeguard your money. But I mean, even here in Canada, we have a bail-in. We have a bail-in policies for banks, right? So creditors can get dinged in the situation of a crisis, which is a pretty terrifying sort of thing conceptually. Me as an individual, as a millennial, where we're so often touted in the news as getting, you know, one of the we kind of got a rough hand. We kind of just got to cope with it, is the argument that a lot of news publications will put out there, right? And so the idea that even if I do my absolute best and I do everything right, that a central bank can just take away my money, that and banks have failed within our lifetimes. They've had bailouts within our lifetimes. So, you know, that's a very real possibility. And why would I as an individual want to put my money at risk with that, with an institution that is failing? So there's a lot of reasons why people will probably start migrating away from these central banks over time. Do I think Gen X, you know, boomers are going to are largely going to move over? No, I think they'll probably treat it as a speculative vehicle. I think they'll enjoy the wealth appreciation and the speculative side of the market, and that's great. That's adoption too. But I think you're really going to start seeing the adoption from a practical standpoint as we move into younger generations, you know, younger millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. Those are going to be the people that really carry the practical application of blockchain into the next 100 years or so.
I'm just going to jump in if you don't mind, Peter. I just have
Carry on.
That's burning. So Nicholas, to me, gold and silver are something tangible. You know, I can hold it in my hand and know that I am carrying an asset, some currency. Whereas cryptocurrency is a digit or a bunch of digits on a computer screen. How do people have the same faith in a cryptocurrency as they do in the tangible asset?
I mean, it's a great question, and there is a school of logic out there that says if you can't physically hold it, you don't own it. However, I would argue that we're already largely comfortable, the vast majority with us in developed nations, with a digital currency. You probably have a banking app on your phone. You probably have, you know, you do e-banking versus physically holding cash, especially throughout the course of this pandemic, right? So there is already a certain level of comfort that we have around digital currencies as a concept. But we like to, at Load, we understand the initial logic I was just talking about, that if you can't physically hold it, you don't own it, which is why we have a redemption policy for these physical assets, because we want to give people the confidence that they can withdraw this if they would prefer it. Now, we do have limitations on that right now. I think the minimum is 100 ounces, which is, yes, kind of high. But the concept here and the planning is that as the company grows, as the operation becomes bigger and bigger, we grow into the tens of thousands, 100,000s, and millions, we'll be able to offer smaller and smaller denominations. So in as much that people could go in and grab, you know, a 1 ounce coin of gold or silver to suit their needs. And we try to provide trust and transparency through you know, vaulting reports, audits, and giving users more insight into the circulating supplies and what's going on there. So yeah, there is an element that does require a leap of faith, but I would argue if you're at least a baseline investor, you know, using an online brokerage to conduct your trades, you already have a certain amount of faith that they're quote unquote good for the money.
Right.
So I've got one. I've got with my experience in Africa, I have a very suspicious mind, and I'm in favour of digital currency. And as a boomer, I would certainly use them as long as the government can't get hold of it. So my fear is twofold: is we see China this week announcing they're coming up with their own digital currency, and is that a move to do away with physical currency, notes or bank deposits, so that they can control their population even more than they're already controlling them? And I have this concern about deposits at banks in the Western world, in that with all the strange attacks on human rights and independence that we're seeing under the guise of the pandemic, they could very easily start taking control of our bank deposits, whether they're conventional or digital, if they have access to the digital. So sorry, it's a long-winded prelude to a question, but under your system, where it's backed by silver and gold, is that silver and gold safe from exploitation or confiscation by the government?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And just like blockchains themselves are decentralized, we have chosen to take a distributed process with our vaulting. So we have vaults scattered throughout the entire world versus in one central location. And this is one risk mitigation. So no one central agency can say, oh, we would like to claw back all your precious metals, please. Well, it's like, well, we don't actually have those in the country, and the corporate entity that we're dealing with may not be the rightful owner of that gold and silver, right? It may not perform that function within the greater corporate, and I'm looking for the right word here, within the corporate tree, so to speak.
Okay.
So that level provides us some level of protection there. The other thing is, again, that they can't control the currencies themselves. They can create a Chinese government backed currency and put it out into circulation, just like USDC or USDT, and that's fine. They can control that all they want, but if they're allowing people to swap out to Bitcoin on privately held wallets in which they have the individual has the private keys, there is virtually no way for a government to take that back. It's out of their hands entirely, so long as they're on a public blockchain. So if the Chinese government were to say, we're doing a Chinese yuan and nobody can buy Bitcoin, nobody can have access to these technologies whatsoever, then yeah, I would say it's an attempt to take their liberties. What I see of it more as a play is China trying to take dominance as a sense of progressiveness with technology. As the USD is largely considered the world's reserve currency.
Correct.
And I think there is a concerted effort to unseat the United States from that. And that is the bigger play at work I see being right now. Unfortunately, the United States has been a laggard in the innovation sector and in the technology sector for the past 4 years. I mean, if you've ever watched regulators try to have conversations with Facebook or Google, they have absolutely no idea what they are talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so because of that I don't know if it's willful ignorance or what it is, but because of that, as we make this transition to new technology, as the financial sector starts transitioning its currencies over to blockchain and its sector over to blockchain, China has the opportunity to establish itself as a new reserve currency. So a long-winded response to
that's a good one.
Question there, but
I've got a little one to add on to that, but I think the word might better be arrogance than ignorance, or maybe a combination of the two when you're talking about regulators.
A little column A, a little column B, sort of. Any regulators out there, I do love you.
Anyway, what I was going to say, when we do our tax returns here in Canada, we have to declare if we own assets exceeding $100,000 offshore, overseas, right? So if I put my money in one of your load gold and silver funds, is that considered a Canadian asset or an offshore asset?
That's a great question. And I would argue that it really does change depending on the region of the world that you're in, how regulators will view that asset. So the best thing you can do is talk to a tax expert that is experienced in the cryptocurrency industry. My personal interpretation is that, again, if you just purchase an asset and it's on a public blockchain and you're keeping it in a private wallet that I can't edit, manipulate, take away from you, et cetera, et cetera, I would argue that's a Canadian asset because you live in Canada, you own that asset. So that would be my justification. But there are certainly could be cases made that that this is arguably offshore, right?
That's why I asked the question. Yeah.
No, unfortunately, regulation around and taxation around cryptocurrencies, again, because it's not something that central governments really have a strong handle around. Accountability around that is very difficult for them, and the tax regulations around them are even more ambiguous. So for lots of investors, it can be a little confusing for them, which is why, again, highly recommend you speak to a tax expert in your local area, wherever you're listening.
Because there could be serious implications for capital gains as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Kathleen, back to you. Sorry, I'm monopolizing Nicholas here. You go for it.
That's all right. Nicholas, can you explain what the LOAD project is?
Yeah. So the LOAD project, again, is sort of the culmination of all the efforts that have taken place over the past 4 years. It's an initiative to restore silver and gold to the monetary system. We launched this project with what was called the LOAD token. And the LOAD token is a bond that you could have only purchased using gold or silver. Right. And so this was how we chose to accumulate our precious metals rather than taking traditional capital in and then swapping it out for precious metals. We said, if you put your idle silver to work, put your idle gold to work, it's sitting there in the sock drawer collecting dust, and you're going to go to a bullion dealer and you're going to, hemorrhage cash on both sides because they're going to take percentage points. Why don't you put it, why don't you pay for this bond with us? We'll give you this bond that pays a dividend in gold and silver. And we'll take the physical asset and we'll turn it into this currency and put it into circulation. And we'll reserve a segment of that for operational costs, because reality is it takes money to run a business. And that was our flagship product. And so that is how the LOAD project really came into conception into the cryptocurrency space. And LOAD is a little bit different from most traditional sort of corporate entities or conglomerates that you might see out there. We are not one monolith. Even within the companies that we work within, the whole project is serviced by a series of service providers. So contractors and businesses that are interested in fulfilling this mandate that we have of restoring silver and gold to the monetary system. So the entire hierarchy is a little more flat versus top down, because you may have multiple executives working, working to achieve a common goal that all share a same rank and title across, 3 or 4 different businesses versus, here is the top of the rung and here are the, the middle management and here are the worker bees. Right. So it's a little unconventional and, as I said, ambitious, but the model, I think, was really well suited to the pandemic that we've been going through since we were already very distributed across the world. We have individuals everywhere from Switzerland all the way through to where I live, and we have employees everywhere, Canada, United States, France, et cetera, et cetera. Because we were already distributed when the pandemic hit, there wasn't much to adapt to because our lives were already operating in this sense. So it kind of gave us a little bit of a leg up.
Sure. Quick one. What's your unit of currency called? What do you call it? So if I want to invest in one of the gold or silver funds, what am I buying?
Yeah, absolutely. So the AGX coin and the AUX coin. So AG being silver, AUX, and AU being gold, right? So coin. So, and the X stands for simply exchange. So silver exchange, gold exchange, right?
Great.
And then you can easily access them by heading over to loadpay.com and downloading our mobile wallet. Within seconds, you can start making your first purchases. If you're interested, if you're a silver or gold bug and you like this concept of perhaps not having to pay the vaulting fees or put the burden on your partner of having a massive vault in your house somewhere or burying it in your backyard, even if it's just for something as domestic as that, is really, really easy to get started today using our mobile wallet, which you can find on your app stores under LoadPay Mobile. Yeah. Additionally, though, we are among the first in the world to list a silverback cryptocurrency on a public exchange. And we'll be doing that in the next quarter here on the Hotbit exchange, which we're very, very excited about as well. So there are other competitors in the gold market for cryptocurrencies, and even in silver too. But gold has really taken the limelight in terms of precious metals and stable coins. We feel there is a really strong felt need for silver that hasn't really been addressed within there. And I think we are arguably the first to bat to do this the right way in the world, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, very good. Fascinating.
Yeah.
We're getting toward the end of our time, so let's go back to Kathleen.
So is the LOAD project aimed at big investors, or anybody can invest in LOAD? Is that right?
Yeah. So this is largely a grassroots for the people by the people project. Of course, we're gonna work with institutional money and big money as well. We want this to be successful. We are taking on the biggest players in the industries. I like to frame it as we're building the PayPal of gold and silver, which means we're going up neck and neck against PayPal, Visa, Venmo, Revolut, and all those big dogs out there. So of course we're going to accept institutional money, but at its core and at its heart, we've structured the system so everybody can get in on it. And I apologize. Everybody has the opportunity to participate. This is for the people and by the people.
Excellent. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you have another question, Peter?
No, it was just the good one. We've got to ask Nicholas which of the links he's been talking about is the best one for people to find out more or to contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would argue that if you're like, you know what, Nick, I've listened to you talk for 45 minutes and I'm tired of this, just send me to the website, loadpay.com, LODEPay.com is going to be your .com is going to be your best website. If you're really interested in diving into everything that the LOAD project is about, if you're more of a sophisticated investor, show me the white paper, et cetera, you're going to want to head over to LODE, LODE.one. ONE, and this is really where you can learn all that important investment information before you go ahead and dive headfirst into it. On both those platforms, you can get an account started within a couple seconds.
Excellent.
However, and if you're looking to have a conversation with us, if you want to just ask some questions, our Telegram channel, which you can find on either website, is arguably one of the best ways to jump right into our pool of really ambitious people about this project, and who will be happy to educate you and bring you up to speed on things. If you feel like arguing opinions with me, you can find me on Twitter at Nicholas Prouten. Just the name, keeping it simple. And we do actually produce our own media shows where I play news anchor. And I have the opportunity to interview lots of really interesting personalities throughout the financial sector. And you can find us on YouTube and most social media with Load Pay Media.
Load Pay Media. Excellent. Well, that gives our audience a lot of opportunity to find out more. And I'll certainly be looking at those as well to find out more for myself. Thank you very much, Nicholas. That's great.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute delight, Nicholas. Thank you. And hopefully you come back and visit us sometime. And thank you all so very much for tuning in. And once again, we love reading your comments, so do please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.